WHAAAA.
New Year's Eve marks one step further on that long, slow march towards the annihilation that awaits us all, with New York City's iconic annual ball drop acting as a symbolic reminder of the physical droopage which will affect all humans eventually to one degree or another, as that spiteful personification Father Time takes his revenge on the young. In honor of these annual festivities, I'm going to be making a stuffed pork loin, but this stuffing is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be made up of nuts, berries, some citrus marinated pork shoulder, and a pork neck reduction to hold it all together. In creating this recipe, I was inspired by what a forest-dwelling and maybe lightly cannibalistic wild swine would taste like. There's a few steps to this one, so if we get started now, maybe we can finish before the year's over. Our journey begins by covering some pig neck bones in oil and roasting them in a 425 degrees Fahrenheit oven until thoroughly browned, flipping them over halfway through for even coverage. Then stick them in a pot with some water and simmer for at least 6 hours, skimming off the top as much as you're able before someone calls attention to it. When you're happy with your stock, strain out the solids and split the yield in twain. To bind our stuffing, we're simply going to reduce half our stock until it gets syrupy. Dig the exaggerated viscosity of the bubbles here. As you can see, we evaporated about 80% of the water volume out of the pig solution. The other half of the stock will be used to make a gravy to drizzle over top of our final dish. This is going to be your standard roux-based gravy, so start by melting some butter, and once it starts bubbling, add in an equal part of flour and whisk to evenly coat each individual flour flake and brown it. For this type of gravy, I like to get the roux as brown as playground sand after a mild rain. Then slowly add in your stock while whisking vigorously and season with salt and lots and lots and lots of black pepper, and continue to whisk until it's thickened to your liking. The first step when prepping pig shoulder is to slice it in half and marvel at its marbling. Then liberally salt it all over and let it sit in the fridge so the seasoning can penetrate all the way through the muscle fibers. The loin will require a touch of engineering. We're going to increase its surface area by turning it from a log into a pamphlet. Except this pamphlet won't contain somebody's political manifesto. It will contain a delicious nut and berry mushroom stuffing. Simply slice the loin 2/3 of the way down, and then slice the newly liberated 2/3 in half. Then, just like with the other piece of meat, salt it all over generously. It's a big piece, so don't worry about over-salting. Then, find a way to jimmy all this meat into the icebox so it can rest and not rot. To create a marinade for our pork shoulder, we're going to juice many citrus fruits. 2 part orange to 1 part lemon and lime. Then smash up several cloves of garlic, haphazardly removing the skins, and placing them in a container with your meat and submerge with your extracted citrus juice. You can let this marinate overnight, but don't let it go too much longer because the citric acid will start to dissolve the meat and the texture will go from tender and soft to distasteful and scandalous. Once the loin has absorbed the salt, You can further perfume it by adding some aromatics to it while it sits in the fridge. I peeled some lemon rinds and squished them slightly to release some of those aromatic oils into the meat more effectively. Then, similarly, I hand-crushed some sage, thyme, rosemary, and marjoram and rolled it all up and placed it back in the fridge overnight. For the stuffing, we're going to roast some chestnuts. To prep them, use a pair of scissors to slice open the upper portion of the shell and then soak them for an hour in water to soften them up. Then strain them, pat them dry, coat them with a little bit of oil, and roast them in a 350 degrees Fahrenheit oven, cut side up for about 30 minutes, turning the heat up to 425 degrees for the last little while until they look like this. Then cover them with a kitchen towel so they can steam and loosen and relax. Once they've rested, you can easily separate the starchy little brains from their skulls and set them aside. Next, roughly chop a huge amount of mushrooms into fungal confetti. Heat up equal parts of butter and olive oil and cook those mushrooms down with some salt. As I've said before in previous videos, the amount of mushrooms may appear to be ridiculously too much, but they will shrink down substantially to just a fraction of their original size. See? Told you. When you're happy with them, set them aside. Next, we're going to roast 3 things at once. Chop a head of garlic almost in half and drizzle with olive oil beside an aluminum foil nest that's filled with raw walnuts. We roast the walnuts in order to both deepen the flavor as well as to remove the bitterness that's in the skins of raw walnuts. Then, remove the pork shoulder from the marinade and set it down on some paper towels to remove any excess liquid, but don't pat them dry entirely, as the sugar from the citrus will caramelize in the oven and become extra delicious. Coat them with a little bit of oil and stick them in the oven along with your nuts and garlic. When your walnuts have browned after about 5 minutes or so, take them out and then put the garlic back in. The garlic will need about 30 to 40 minutes depending on the size of the head of garlic and the strength of your oven. Make sure to check on your pork periodically and turn the pieces over so you get even caramelization. At some point during all this, the garlic will tell you that it's done, and hopefully you'll be listening. As your garlic screams, yearning for freedom, you can chop up your now cooled walnuts into a loose gravel and stick them in a bowl. Do the same with your chestnuts. And also your mushrooms. Then, add in some pine nuts. Now, pine nuts are normally expensive as they require a lot of labor to process. But luckily for me, I'm both entrepreneurial and innovative, so I've convinced an army of desperate and naive squirrels to do all the hard work for me under the guise of them being independent contractors rather than simply disposable cogs. Lastly, chop up some blueberries and blackberries and mix them all around. Lastly, squeeze in your roasted garlic. I promise I won't make a pimple-popping joke, but only if you insist. Salt and pepper to taste, and then add in your reduced pig neck potion to the mix. This is already absurdly delicious, but we're gonna add in one last thing to utterly annihilate any semblance of sanity left in our sense organs. This unapologetically pornographic pork. Chop it up and add it to your mix along with the accumulated juices. To assemble, you're going to want to pound out your loin to make it flatter, further increasing the surface area and tenderizing it more. See, most people that I've seen do this online use a meat hammer, but I just have a regular hammer, so I just washed it, covered it with some plastic wrap, closed my eyes and thought of England. Anyway, unwrap your meat roll-up, remove the now spent herbs and lemon rinds, and go to Pound Town. Once Pound Town is a distant memory, spread out your stuffing and roll it up tightly, doing your best not to let any stuffing leak out of the sides. Tie up your meat log with some butcher's twine. That ought to help hold it in place. Then simply sear your swine until browned on all sides. And roast uncovered in a 325 to 350 degrees Fahrenheit oven until delicious looking and the internal temperature registers 160. It will continue to rise up to 165 after you pull it out, so don't you go calling the FDA on me. It should take about an hour, give or take. Once it's rested for an hour, slice it open and admire the cross-section. Plate it up on a slice of tree and decorate it in such a way that would make Martha Stewart herself vomit with jealous rage. Then drizzle on some of your gravy from earlier and enjoy. Finally. Hello everyone, once again I find myself in an exhibitionist frenzy. Let's try this. It's not often that I impress myself. So listen, I don't have a time machine, so I can't verify what I'm about to say. But this tastes like if I went to a pre-Christian Germanic forest and licked the dirt. It's a perfect balance between the sweetness and the earthiness from the berries and the nuts and the stuffing, and the salty depth of the pork neck gravy that kind of binds it all together on top of this lean and perfectly seasoned little sponge of pork loin that's just slightly piggy. Well, that's it for this year. And always remember, do what you love because nobody cares and it doesn't matter.